Hi, James Cuthbertson, CRO at Relative Insight. As you may know, Relative Insight, we are a source of information and knowledge on all things language. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, we are being asked a great deal by customers and prospects about ChatGPT. What is it? What should they be doing about it? How should they be acting? And so we thought it was important to find half an hour with our head of AI and data science, Ryan Callihan, who is a thought leader in the space. And so I was able to spend a bit of time with him, take him through some questions, pick his brains a little bit, and hopefully find out some information that's going to help you in your day to day. So enjoy the interview with Ryan. Thanks very much. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
Hello, good morning. I'm well. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Very good, thanks. And delighted to be speaking to you. How's Lancaster?
Currently gray and drizzly, which is generally the norm.
Nothing if not
How's
consistent.
how's London?
Oh, London's
Tropical?
Miami-like sunshine, as
Oh, I
always.
bet it is. I bet it is.
Right. Anyway, on with the show. So, thank you very much for joining me today. We're going to be talking all things Chat GPT. It's obviously a rising tide in our industry and elsewhere, and it's something that we're being asked a lot about. And there's a lot of people keen to find out what on earth it actually is. So let's start there, Ryan. If you're happy with that, what actually is Chat GPT?
What is ChatGPT? Well, I guess it's important to note that I think this kind of technology that ChatGPT is built on came into the public consciousness, December, end of last year, and has kind of, well, it sounds stupid to say it, but gone viral. But like quite literally, I know people who their parents are using it. So that's the level of understanding and adoption we're at the moment. But the technology that ChatGPT is built on is called a transformer architecture. It sounds big and scary. Sounds like sort of a big bad blockbuster film. But in reality, it's just a bunch of matrix multiplication that finds patterns and it generates patterns essentially. So the GPT part of Chat GPT is a specifically branded version of this model from OpenAI, and it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. There's the word transformer in there.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah,
so 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 Chat GPT effectively is a brand name, is it?
it is. It is a brand name. Transformers, not a brand name when it comes to this technology, not cartoons. But yeah, GPT definitely a brand name. Which specifically ChatGPT is a sub brand of theirs because the original line of models, for lack of a better word, that OpenAI has put out called GPT. First there was GPT, and then GPT-2, and then GPT-3, and very creative naming scheme they have. Whereas ChatGPT is a sort of a specialized version of GPT-3. Sometimes it's called GPT 3.5.
Okay.
That is made specifically for chatting, like a chatbot.
Got you. Okay, fine. So obviously we wanted today to be like kind of a fireside chat style conversation, and as you know, our audience tends to be people working in insights, market research, marketeers, etc. So if I am in marketing or in insights, like what could or should I be doing with ChatGPT right now?
Well, I'm glad that you asked what could you and should you be doing, because for the should part, I would be hesitant to say you should use it for anything. But I would say you could use it in any process that like helps your overall process. I know there's ways I personally use it, but I talking to marketing professionals, they use it for writing copy, for summarization, uh, like anything that involves routine writing, where you already know what you want to say, you have a general outline for it, and it's just sort of filling the skeleton with meat and flesh that you have. Yeah, there's just the stuff that takes time. So yeah, I'd say you could use it. in any way that speeds up your process. Once you find something that it speeds up your process, maybe you should, once you identify those things.
Okay, so someone I was speaking with last week, they talked about their agency having coined this phrase, which is like play, don't publish. What do you think of that?
Was it being used in the sense of like experimentation?
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. Like this technology is useful. It is a complicated technology, but in the like when it comes down to it, it's also just kind of fun. So yeah, play around with it, explore, and if you find something that works, capitalize on that. Really.
Okay,
Mm.
cool. Okay, fantastic. So moving on then, one of the things that is being discussed in boardrooms across the land, right, is what tech or tools or methodologies can be replaced or supplemented with ChatGPT. Like, what's your view on that generally?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think probably there's an unsaid question in there that a lot of CEOs are probably asking, not like what processes can we replace, but who can we replace? If we're being real, and I think the answer to that is probably no one at the moment, if ever, really. I think the key word here is augment. So there's a lot of ways that tools like ChatGPT, and there are lots of others as well, can be used to augment processes. So as an example, Microsoft, which is one of the big backers of OpenAI, is going to start integrating either ChatGPT or GPT-3 into Microsoft Office products to help increase productivity. It's not replacing someone creating Excel files or Excel spreadsheets, but if there's ways to automate creation of macros or entering in information, it detects the patterns that people are doing, and if there's ways to speed up those sort of routine tasks, then that's a great thing to supplement.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So it's your advice would be, don't look to be replacing either part of your workforce or of your tech stack or methodologies, but rather see if you can supplement or augment. And it kind of goes back to
Yeah.
your earlier point, which is around kind of speeding up things or slightly improving things as opposed to replacing them. Okay. I think
Yeah,
that's
and it'll really sort of speed up a lot of things is my view. I know with like I work in sort of software development world, and this generative technology is speeding up code. It's not replacing developers, but it's helping speed up certain routine things that they're doing so they can focus on things that really do take a human brain and human creativity to do.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So naturally, we both work at Relative Insight. We're a text analytics company that help our customers analyze and visualize text data. And so we tend to work with four main sources of data, as you know, Ryan, which is open-ended questions in surveys, review data, customer contact center data, and then social, right? So how is Relative Insight different to ChatGPT? Like, what would you say that the main differences are?
Um, I, it's almost an unequal comparison. It's to me it's almost like asking what's the difference between a hammer and a sort of a general contractor or a builder, right? Can like are they the same? No. But like does a builder use a hammer? Yes. And does a hammer need a builder to use it? Yes. Um, this generative AI technology is a hammer. It is a tool. It's a very good tool. It's a very useful tool, and it can be used for all sorts of situations. I mean, what it is meant for is generating text, and then ChatGPT is meant to be a chatbot. Um, is it meant to give you all knowledge that exists in the world in a very conversational way? No, no. It can pretend to do that, but it can just as equally give you the right answer as the wrong answer, and it sounds correct in both situations. So, what relative insight is a solution. It's a full solution that includes several different AI technologies to uncover meaning and actionable metrics in text that can be backed up by evidence. Things like ChatGPT do some bits of that, but not all of that. It cannot give you an accurate number of like a metric of like, here's a metric, here's your text turned into a distinct metric that can be backed up with evidence. It can't do that. But what it can do is help take that, the sort of hard facts that are uncovered through our AI and communicate it in a way that sounds more natural and understandable to someone, especially someone that doesn't understand numbers, statistics as much, because like, let's be frank, most people are scared by numbers. And if it can take that information and turn it into a plain natural language explanation of it, then it's great. I mean, we use it internally for that, getting asked by internal users like, oh, could you explain how this part of the platform works? Or could you explain this number? And several times already, I've written up an explanation that's like a paragraph, and I'm like, I feel like that's pretty easy. But then I've put it into ChatGPT and said, can you explain this but easier? And the answers it comes up with are really, really good because I'm telling it exactly what I want it to do, what I want it to communicate. It's not doing that on its own. It's using what I'm giving it to communicate.
Yeah, totally. And it feels like you mentioned a few times in that answer, like this idea of metrics, these measurable business metrics that people need to rely on in order to actually build stories internally. It feels like that's a huge difference. And I don't know whether you would agree or not, but it also feels like the ChatGPT is kind of a single player game. It's not necessarily very easy to collaborate using ChatGPT with different teams and different functions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. It's not meant to be a full solution, at least at this stage. Maybe in the future they'll come up with some solutions for different industries, but it's not what it's meant for.
Yeah, cool. So let's pinch in on that then. So where do you think we're going next with the whole GPT series and this generative AI movement? Like, what do you think is coming next?
Do you mean in general or like us as Relative Insight?
Answer it both ways.
Right. So I'll start with ways that we're looking at using it within Relative Insight in the short to medium term, and then I'll talk about the general things, which I think will be kind of ubiquitous across the board. So yeah, we are going to be releasing features in the coming weeks and months that use generative AI as part of the workflow of Relative Insight, whether that's summarizing insights that are created, like a user, finds some interesting metrics and some interesting verbatims that really support a viewpoint or a discovery, and we're going to be using that to help them communicate to their stakeholders better. We're going to be using it to try to explain some of the more hard to understand numbers and metrics, summarizing data in a more holistic way. And like we have a lot of other proofs of concept going around that are just kind of fun anyways. And everything that we're doing is meant to be smoothing out a process and helping our users understand and communicate better.
Yeah. Okay. So that's within the walls of Relative Insight then.
Yes,
so then let's talk about
in the short to medium term. Yes.
Yeah. And then what about generally out there? Where do you think this movement's going next?
So, in short, I think it's headed toward normalization and acceptance. And I'll say what I mean by that. So, if you remember back long, long ago when we were wee lads, when the internet was just growing, right? And so I was probably, I think it was before as a teenager that things like the dancing baby meme came out, and then eventually salad fingers, if you remember that, like really creepy web comics and all this stuff. And that, if you think back to that time, things like GIFs were being used on all these websites that are really lo-fi, terrible, but fun, right? And that's where like the dancing baby meme, whatever it was, came from. It was just someone was bored and they were playing around with it because it's fun, it's interesting. A bunch of nerds were playing around with it, and it was a novelty. It didn't really like mean anything to our lives. It was just entertainment. And I think that where we're at with generative AI is in a similar situation. We see how it could be really useful. It's a lot of fun to play with. Like you see it all over social media, people playing with it. And there's other types of generative technologies. There's like image generation, people generating completely new images that always look like a little bit uncanny, like it has trouble with fingers. Starting to get into video generation, voice generation, things like this. Like I saw a video like 2 weeks ago that was kind of like a Balenciaga runway video but like with Harry Potter characters. It was just weird and fun. Now, is that useful? Maybe not at the moment, but will it be useful? I will say definitely yes, it will be useful. Just like the internet started with dancing babies, now we don't even think about it because it's a normal part of our lives.
Yeah.
And that's where I see this technology going. We're excited about it, and we see uses of it, and people are starting to integrate in ways that it's useful. But like in a year's time, I think it'll just be like, well, of course we use this technology. It's just normal. It's how we interact with technology.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I think what the one thing I've seen as a relative kind of like outsider to this, and being in a non-technical role myself, is like other things that have happened on the internet, like that have kind of gone viral or have picked up momentum, haven't necessarily transitioned so quickly into the world of work. And I think that the ChatGPT has like landed right on our doorstep for pretty much
Yeah.
everyone, and that's
Yeah.
what's probably kind of made it so interesting and also so important to understand for people in marketing and insights roles.
Yeah.
So obviously we've waxed lyrical about the wonders of ChatGPT, how cool it is, how interesting, how fun. Just before we finish up, my final question would be like, you mentioned when we were talking in the week about some of the weaknesses with ChatGPT and some of the things that people don't necessarily realize it gets wrong. You mentioned
Yeah.
hallucination, for example. Like, I'd love to hear just a little bit about that, because I'm not sure that people are actually all that aware that it is fallible. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's about
Yeah.
that.
Um, I'm trying to think of what would be the most impactful to say here, because there is a lot of danger and there's a lot of problems with the this technology, and like I guess for anyone that's listening, if you want to seem like you really know what you're talking about with this technology and kind of show off, like read a little bit about the dangers of generative AI and some of the ethical questions around it, and you'll seem like you know what you're talking about. But if I were to pick two, first one I would pick would be there is a danger of if you're using this to write copy, like ad copy, marketing materials, and things like that, there's a risk that um, you will not be very different in your language, like your differentiation in how you communicate may sound like everyone else that's using the technology. Um, if you're just using it to replace what you're doing. And then the other thing would be around negative bias. Now, some people may have heard reference to like racist AI or sexist AI. The the AI is not racist or sexist. It has no feelings. It's just a bunch of numbers, essentially. But what this technology is very, very good at is picking up patterns. And if there is unwanted bias in the data that you're using to train these models, in the input to these models, those patterns will be picked up. So I saw an article the other day from the CEO of Textio. It's like a NLP solution for recruitment, I think. And she was looking at using ChatGPT to write sort of headhunting emails and messages.
Oh, yeah.
And it could write a very general, very boring headhunting email that would not get you noticed at all. But then if you start adding in your own information into it, then that's a lot better. But when she was putting in pieces like we're looking to increase diversity of our staff, or like this candidate is a Latina mother, something like that. Those bits of information were being injected into the generated output in a very sort of weird, unnatural, and frankly sexist and racist way.
Right. Okay.
But when the same information was given, being like, it is a white father, no mention of those things whatsoever,
Okay.
because that is based on the data it is given,
Right.
is considered the norm, which is not the norm, obviously,
because it's trained on that kind of data set. Okay, fine.
So yeah, just like being aware that there will always be bias in AI technology. We can't eliminate bias entirely, but we can be very intentional of what we look at and what kind of bias we choose to inject into our models and systems.
Got you. Okay. Fantastic, Ryan. Thank you very much for that. It was really, really insightful. I know that a lot of people are grappling and trying to get their hands around what on earth ChatGPT is and how they can use it in their day-to-day. So I truly hope that that's been helpful and insightful for those people to try and make some headway. We've been Relative Insight, Ryan and James. Please do hit us up on our website. We produce regular content. We also have a bi-monthly Spotlight Series event, which we'd love you to attend. And thank you very much for joining us.